This is the Art and Business of Writing podcast, connecting you with writers and experts who can help to improve and promote your writing. So what inspired you to get into the family communication side?
Well, I think my biggest inspiration was, of course, just starting my own family. You know, my past background is in public relations and marketing and in healthcare. And then I left my job to stay at home with my children when they came along. And I think that's what really kind of drove my interest. That, and I have the background in communication just from my schooling. That's what my major was in my background. So I think that's probably why I kind of fell into it and really started to delve deeper into it. It's just something I love to research and learn more about. A lot of it's just a little bit selfish. I want to learn more to improve my own family dynamics.
Well, that's awesome that you're kind of a writer with a PR background. That probably helps you a lot, doesn't it?
It does a little bit. It definitely helped me understand how media works because my focus in public relations was media relations. So I really had the opportunity to get to know journalists, and I have a journalism degree, or it's kind of a minor in journalism. But so I worked a lot with reporters, really enjoyed it, and to be completely honest, I was a little envious of them because I really thought what they did looked like a lot more fun than what I was doing.
Right? It's always like that, when you get I went from writing to editing and I was like, man, it'd be so cool to be an editor. And then when you become an editor, you're like, man, I miss being a writer, So it's always that grass is greener thing always kind of hits you,
Exactly.
Let's turn back the clock a little bit. I want to talk about you as a writer, how you got started, and then kind of progress through your writing life. So when did you realize that you were a writer?
Well, I've always loved to write ever since I was a little girl. I kept journals. I would write little stories. It was just something I enjoyed doing, and probably because I love to read so much. It wasn't until, I was working in PR and marketing, and I was doing a lot of writing in that industry, and I just would get lost in the writing. I loved it. And I started to get a lot of positive feedback on my work. Particularly, I started to notice that, newspapers and magazines were starting to pick up my press releases and publishing them verbatim, sometimes even giving me a byline, which kind of blew my mind because that doesn't happen a lot. When you're in PR, I guess, or at least I don't think it does. So I really started to realize that writing was my true calling and what I really wanted to focus my career on. So that's kind of how it all evolved, if you will.
Okay. And what were some of the fears and challenges that you kind of faced early on when you started to kind of walk that path of becoming a writer?
Oh, I think the hardest part is just the submission process. You do all this work, you write it, you send it out, kind of, gnashing your teeth a little bit. Is it ready? Is this right? Are they going to like it? There's that whole fear of submission and getting it out there and putting it out there to your work to strangers and wondering if they're going to approve of it. And I think that was probably the biggest challenge, was just learning to press send and getting it out there.
Wow. So I guess how do you drum up the courage? Like you said, just pressing that send button, was it one of those things where you just said, okay, I'm just going to hit it and go? Or how long did you kind of wrestle with, okay, is it good enough? Or the whole perfectionism complex? Is it right? Is it good? Is it what I want it to be?
Right. It really had to, at first it was really hard. It would take me a week sometimes to go ahead and just send it. And then I realized I've got to start submitting this stuff. I mean, that's the only way to get published is if you submit it. And I sort of had to desensitize myself to that process. So, anytime I'm sending out something new, I'm always going to wonder if I got it right. But in the way, I think it's good to be a little bit nervous. It's sort of like performance or public speaking. It's always good to be just a little bit nervous because I think that really helps you work harder and make sure that what you're sending out is something you really care about. Because if you don't really care about it, you're not going to be nervous about it. So I think nervousness can sort of drive some positive energy into your work. And so I just kept motivating myself by saying, I'm just going to keep sending. And slowly over time, it got easier.
Now, what's the one thing that nobody ever tells you about being a writer?
I think it's that fear of it's the criticism and rejection, and sort of particularly when you're sending stuff out and you're not getting any feedback. And so you're not really sure whether they liked it or if they just got a whole bunch of stuff and they haven't gotten to it yet, or if, you don't really get any real types of feedback. And so I think that lack of constructive feedback and criticism it kind of, you feel like you're working in almost a vacuum. It can be kind of isolating, which is probably why I think it's so important to surround yourself with a really strong type of writing community or a group of writers who can help you make your work stronger. And, and just a lot of it just takes time of building those relationships with those editors for them to start saying, I like this, I don't like that, if they're willing to do that.
And I'm glad you mentioned having a solid support system in a writing community. Do you have one that you belong to? And if so, can you talk about it a little bit, like the benefits of it?
Yes, I do belong to a small writing community. And I think the biggest benefits are, anytime I have something I'm a little unsure of and I want to bounce an idea off of people, they're there to provide very honest feedback for me. I think that's the hardest part, is finding other writers who are going to be incredibly honest with you. And, sometimes that criticism can hurt, but if it's constructive, I think it's very helpful. And if we start looking at it that way and not as a personal attack, that can make you're right. You just have to look at it as my writing's getting stronger because these people are willing to take the time to give me feedback on my work. And in the same respect, I do that for them. So I think a writing group can really be helpful. There's pros and cons to writing groups that, I've heard of. It's just a matter of finding the right group for you.
Good. Now let's look at your writing life. What are you currently working on?
So I just sent out a campaign. It started this week. It's called 52 Weeks of Family Conversation Starters. And this was sort of inspired by my book, Happy, Healthy, and Hyperconnected, about growing stronger families, more connected families, just through the art of conversation. And the purpose of these e-cards, they're beautiful. I think they're beautiful. Weekly. They're free, and they come out every Monday morning. They land in your inbox, and, you could be driving around in your car with your kids or sitting around the dinner table looking, kind of wondering, I need something else to talk about here. The kids are starting to fight. What's something we can talk about that would get some good conversation going? And I think when we find those opportunities, and sometimes we have to be sort of deliberate about it, and that's what these conversation starters help. They're sort of prompts that families can use, whether they're sitting around the dinner table or driving around the car. And it can help kids learn to listen to each other. It can help the whole family listen to each other and drive some small talk skills, and then also add some of that thoughtfulness about, why we think certain things. So for example, like the one that went out this morning was, what do you think of when you think of summer? And so it's an open-ended question that, my kids, I've tried a lot of these questions out on my own kids, and they love to talk about this stuff because they always have sort of a unique perspective. And I think we get to know each other better when we're given that opportunity.
Absolutely. That's really cool, to be able to it takes the edge off of parenting a lot when you have people who can kind of feed you advice and tips to kind of help you feel like there's something that you can, add value to your kids with. I really like what you do with that, actually.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Cool. And so you just now launched that. So I guess I'd be interested to hear about the feedback at some point, how people like it, and kind of how it's working for people. It sounds like such a great program.
Yeah, I hope they like it. We'll see. I'm just now getting it off the ground and running. So we'll see how it goes. And if it goes well, then maybe I'll do it again next year. But it'll be every Monday, and people can jump on board whenever. You don't have to have started yesterday. They can jump in anytime.
Now, is this something that perhaps maybe, when it's all said and done, that you'll compile as an ebook or something, or?
I don't know. I've been kind of wondering that myself, to be perfectly honest. I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do with that. I think it would be kind of cool to put it all together in some way, in some fashion, but I'm not sure yet.
Okay, cool. So with regards to writing, how do you approach your writing, like from a process standpoint?
Well, I'm the type of person that has to have a deadline, or it just doesn't get done. So if I don't have an editor setting a deadline for me, then I am setting my own deadlines. And I think that's especially important if you're working on a book. If you don't have deadlines set for each step of the way, I think it would be, for me, it would be an impossible task to ever finish that book. So that's probably the biggest way I approach writing, and just trying to stay disciplined, carving out hours within the day of when I'm going to do my work.
I'm glad you mentioned kind of carving out the time, because I know that's funny that as a writer, sometimes we romanticize about having like big blocks of time just to write. And that's so not the case ever, especially if you have a wife and you've got kids and you've got commitments. Like finding that time to write is so important. How do you slice your time, or how do you fit things in around your busy schedule?
Well, I have a trusty little tool called a whiteboard. And I basically, every Sunday, I sit down and I plan out our entire week. I put down all my kids' activities, and I put down where I'm going to work within that week. So it's sort of like, this is my time I've scheduled. And, but in the summertime, it gets a little bit trickier because I've got the kids home from school. During the school year, I can set pretty much a time of 8 to 3, which I never got to do when they were toddlers. It was just like I would work first thing in the morning, during nap time, and at night. So I think if you really, really love to write and that's what you want to do, you just find the time for it and you just take advantage of it when it becomes available. If you're waiting for giant blocks of time, I just think you could be waiting forever, because life just has a way of constantly getting in the way. And, I've even dragged my laptop to the pool while the kids have been swimming or whatever, just so I could get a little bit of work done in between, daily interruptions. But somehow it all gets done.
Yes, it does. So where and how do you cultivate like ideas for your writing?
What do you mean exactly?
Where do your ideas and inspiration come from that you put into your writing? Like for your books or for your blog, where do you find inspiration for those?
I find lots of inspiration just from talking to other parents. A lot of the things I'm going through with my own children, I figure other parents are probably going through something similar. So a lot of times and then I'll do research based on that to see if perhaps this is a big issue. I also have a Facebook group that I lean on from time to time, asking them. They're a group of moms. It's called Confidently Connected Moms. It's on Facebook. And, I share a lot of my writing work with them, just the stuff that I publish, my blog and that sort of thing. And then I'll ask them questions about what's on their mind. What are they struggling with right now? So I really try to reach out to my community, whether that's neighbors, whether it's just community organizations I belong to, and just try to pay attention. I'm an observer by nature, so I definitely try to notice what's happening around me and the different types of issues that parents are dealing with. With my book, a lot of it came from Confidently Connected really came from my own personal experience from leaving a full-time job and becoming a full-time mom, and then moving to a new community and learning how to reestablish my social network. And I realized a lot of moms have those same types of issues. And then with my other book, Happy, Healthy, and Hyperconnected, my kids are getting to the age now where they're really getting into technology. And the question is, how much screen time is too much screen time, and how is that affecting their overall communication skills and the ability to relate to other people? So that's really where a lot of my inspiration comes from. It comes from all around me.
Well, that's great. So do you have any writing rituals at all? Like any specific places that you like to write, specific things that you do, things you listen to? Every writer has something. What's yours?
I think the biggest thing is finding a moment just to sit down, clear my head, and just start writing. I think, one of the big challenges is staring at a blank page and the blinking cursor and thinking, where do I begin? And so just really giving myself permission at the beginning of the writing process to say, this is going to be a really crappy first draft, and that's okay, because I'm getting all this down and then I can go through and start really organizing and polishing the information. So from a ritual standpoint, it might be taking a walk before I sit down to write, just, things that can help clear my head. Yoga often helps. And then, sometimes it's a matter of just getting really focused, lighting a candle, getting my cup of coffee, and just going and just, starting.
Now, how often do you write?
I write pretty much daily. If I'm not writing for an article or doing actual work, I'm journaling or, just making lists. I write all the time.
I understand that. All right. Now, honestly, as a writer, we all know that writing can be a love-hate kind of thing. There are days you absolutely love it, days you can't stand doing it. Which part of the writing process drives you crazy?
Oh, I think the biggest thing is coming up with a really great headline. Headlines drive me crazy. I see all these great headlines people come up with. I'm like, oh, why didn't I think of that? I could have a beautiful piece of work and then I'm thinking, okay, I don't know what to call it. And it can be really frustrating for me. So that's sometimes where I have to walk away and really think on it. So that's probably one area that I really dislike is the whole headlining thing. Of course, it's really important, but
it's so funny. Just being an editor, how many pieces that I get submitted to me that don't have headlines.
Oh, really?
So you're not alone. No, you're not alone at all.
I always give some kind of a headline, but yeah, I wish I could get away with that.
On the flip side, what part of writing do you absolutely love?
I love the part where I love interviewing people and learning more about the topic that I'm interested in. I love hearing their stories. And then I love taking that information, the research and everything I've learned and crafting it into something that people can relate to and understand. I like to, bring something that can be kind of esoteric in nature and bring it down to a level that we can all kind of understand and relate to. Because there's a lot of really interesting research out there that can be really hard to understand, but it's still important. So I really enjoy the process of just writing it in a way that people can, get something out of it and apply it to their lives where it's practical.
Ooh, great. Yeah. Now, every writer has to deal with, those times where they feel blocked or congested with their writing. Like, what do you do to get over your slumps?
I know how this feels. I think every writer, like you said, every writer feels it. A lot of times I just go do something else and I have to walk away. And for me, a lot of times what shakes out the cobwebs in my head or the blocks is taking a walk, getting outside, going for a walk, doing some sort of exercise, going and hanging out with my kids. Sometimes it's, listening to a podcast, it's watching a movie, just doing something sort of outside of the writing process, something completely different. I've even got into this thing where I was making mandalas for a while and getting my colored pencils out and coloring because it was something completely different, but it was creative. And it really helped me kind of break through it was very meditative and I found it really therapeutic. So I would definitely recommend that. And then I've been sort of intrigued by this whole, I don't know if you've heard about this whole adult coloring book phenomenon.
I have, yes.
So I'm sort of intrigued by that idea. That might be the next thing I try next time I have writer's block.
Now, it's funny because I sometimes find that doing non-creative things really jumpstarts the creative, like washing dishes or folding clothes. You ever find that true?
Yeah, I get the best ideas when I'm blow drying my hair. Yeah, definitely. I definitely see that.
All right. So on the business side of things, like how do you promote yourself in your writing?
Well, I have a monthly newsletter that goes out to my audience. I also do a blog, which is kind of slowed down with the summer, but during most of the year, I try to keep that going about once a week. I also promote myself and my writing through Facebook and Twitter, a little bit with Google Plus and also LinkedIn as well.
And knowing what you know now, like what are some of the things regarding promotion that you might have done differently had you known what you know now?
I think the biggest thing is really building that audience long before you start promoting a book. I think that is one of the biggest challenges is just really starting to build that following so that when you do go out to start promoting, you have people who are willing to help promote your work too. And, my audience started out small. It's very slowly. It's a very slow process to grow. Of course, you can't wait around forever when you want to write and get information out. So, it can kind of work both ways. But that's one thing I wish I had done more of was just, I've tried to be involved in the community, but probably it would have helped to be more involved. And you can only do so much, as a parent and a working parent at that. But there's always seems to be more that you can do.
Yeah, it really does seem to be that. It really does seem to be that. Or you always look back and you say, man, had I known about such and such social media platform or this tool, it would have been a lot different, a lot easier for me. So it's always nice to be able to pass that information along to someone else, you know?
Yeah, and that's so true. And I can't think of anything off the top of my head as far as a specific tool. I've tried different things with promotion that have been a lot of fun. So I think a lot of it's just doing things, just try to do different things and keep it fun. And I think then your audience enjoys it too, because then it doesn't feel so self-promotional, I guess.
Right. And you mentioned that you have an email newsletter. Like, how did you develop your email newsletter list?
That started out basically with an announcement to everybody that I was about to come out with my book, Confidently Connected. So I sort of just dragged a bunch of people in who were friends and neighbors. I'm like, hey, I've got this book I'm starting. Here's it was sort of like an announcement that sort of evolved into a monthly newsletter dealing with a lot of issues that moms were dealing with. And slowly over time, that newsletter has evolved more into family communication issues. Yeah. So it's not only for moms, it's for moms and dads. And just with giving tips about just simple things that we can all do to grow stronger as families, especially when we've got so many distractions right now in our lives with this digital generation and just all of the technology out there that surrounds us that can be a big distraction.
Absolutely. Speaking of technology, do you have any writing tools like an Evernote or Scrivener that you like to use?
I am pretty basic. I'm a pencil paper kind of gal. I like my Olympus recorder. I don't know if that really counts. I definitely love my journals. So I don't have anything specifically, enlightening, I guess, as far as a high-tech writing tool that I use, because I really don't. I tend to hash out a lot of my ideas in my journals. And I guess I don't really have anything I can add to that.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Sorry.
You know what? No, it's totally fine. It's funny. There's been so many stories kind of published on, like you talked about being digital versus kind of being more traditional. And there's so many of those new studies coming up where, they talk about how the Generation X is kind of like the ultimate generation because we can do both,
Yeah.
we can work, we can work in digital and we can work in kind of the analog world too, and it's kind of a nice thing,
Yeah, but then you read, there's more studies coming out too about how we tend to be more creative when we're actually putting pen to paper. So it's almost better to, from what I've read, and this is how I justify it, is, I write first on paper because a lot of times then when I go to my computer, it just all seems to come together faster and it tends to be a little bit more creative. So I don't know if there's truth to that, but that's what works for me.
Oh yeah, no, I'm the same way. I'm pretty old school about that. I still use paper for a lot of things. I get the satisfaction of checking things off and the satisfaction of writing things out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all about checking things off.
All right, so I'm going to pick your brain for a little bit.
Sure.
Just a few questions. Just want to have a little fun. So which authors or writers do you most admire?
Well, I love to read, so this was a hard one. Probably off the top of my head, I love Anne Lamott, Stephen King, Natalie Goldberg, love Julia Cameron and her books. Martha Beck and Brene Brown are both people I admire and like to read their stuff. As far as fiction, I like Diana Gabaldon. She's the author of the Outlander series, and I really admire Catherine Stockett, who wrote The Help, just based on how she was so persistent with getting that book published.
Awesome. Now, if you could be any literary character, which one would you be and why?
Oh, any literary character. That is a good question. I wasn't prepared for that one. Let me think for a second.
Sure.
I might have to get back to you on that.
Sure, no problem. So, which book is your go-to book on writing, business, or professional development?
The Writer Mama by Christina Katz really made a big difference for me. I picked that book up right at the cusp of when I was realizing I wanted to start a freelance business. And I had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old underfoot. And it really gave me the confidence to start writing and getting published. And another book that I like of hers is The Writer's Workout. That's a really good one. For inspiration, I often turn to Julia Cameron's book, The Right to Write, which I think is a really great book for anybody who feels scared of, they don't feel like they're the, quote, writer. I think we're all writers. And she gives a lot of great little writing prompts throughout that book. also love Natalie Goldberg's Writing Down the Bones and Stephen King's memoir on writing. Those are books that I found inspiring and helpful.
Oh yeah, I love On Writing. He's just like so candid. I love it, you know.
Oh, I know.
Like the babysitter story, just I love it. All right, so what's the best advice you've ever received with regards to being a writer?
Don't compare yourself to other writers. We all have, our own creative voice. We all have something to add to this world. And if we look at it from a scarcity standpoint, like there's just not going to be enough for me, then I think you're really, it like kind of causes your creative spirit to kind of coil up in a ball and hide in a corner, because it's just, I think we really have to let go of some of that. And I think we have all, at least I have, fallen victim to, I'm not as good as that other person, or I wish I could write like that. But we all have our own unique voice. And I think we need to accept that and keep working away and trying and persisting to get that work out there, because it does matter. And just surrounding yourself with writers who you admire and you can learn from, who can continue to help drive you and motivate you and say, give constructive feedback and tell you, that this is good and you got to get it out there to kind of push you to continue working.
Love it. Love it. That is great and sound. Now, how can our listeners connect with you, Christa?
Well, they can connect with me through email. My email address is Christa Hines, and that's Hines. It's CHRISTA, Hines, HINES 13@gmail.com. Or on Twitter, I'm at Christa Hines 1. And then through my website is another way to get a hold of me, KristaMelnickHines.com. Are you going to post that information?
Yeah, we'll put all the information in the show notes. Absolutely.
That way people can spell the name correctly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, anytime, subscribing to my blog or through my newsletter is a great way to kind of keep up with what I'm working on. And, I love to hear from people. So definitely connect with me for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Christa.
Thanks, Chris. I had fun.
I did too. It was great. And, best of luck on all your future writing endeavors.
All right. Well, thank you. And best of luck with this show. This is great. I can't wait to hear more of them.
Oh, thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye, Chris.
Bye. Wow, what an inspiring episode. If you weren't able to take notes, I've got you covered. Visit my website at www.chrisjonesink.com/podcast to get today's show notes, as well as access other episodes you may have missed. Be sure to subscribe and rate the podcast on iTunes. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time.